pilot program. And since then, there has been not one word in public about how that program is going. And what we find out, Mr. Speaker, in the Public Accounts Committee is, in fact, the Nova Scotia company to which the contract had been awarded withdrew from the contract in frustration with the way that it was being administered by this government. That it was not being dealt with the way the government had said it would be, that they could not earn a profit on the way the program was actually being administered. There are more serious allegations than that, Mr. Speaker, which I'm sure that we will delve into, whether in public accounts or otherwise, about the administration of that contract and about certain things that officials of the Department of Justice are alleged to have said or have done, but I won't go into those here, Mr. Speaker. We find out that the contract for GPS tracking has been awarded to a different company. No news release this time. Maybe because we're not on the verge of an election, Mr. Speaker. We don't know when the contract was awarded. We didn't know to whom. We had to dig out that ourselves. And the allegation is that it was done as a sole source contract, and it was done in such a way that it would not be visible to the public that the contract had been taken away from one company and awarded to another. Mr. Speaker, the allegation is that the GPS tracking contract was, as it were, hidden in another contract that the company had legitimately won, and they were told, well, since you're doing this, why don't you do the GPS tracking as well? Mr. Speaker, the allegation is that the ankle bracelets are now being applied by a private security company rather than by professional guards. All of these things, Mr. Speaker, have to do with the administration of justice. They have to do with whether the system is working or not, about who has an ankle bracelet on, and whether that is allowing the Department of Justice to say that when you are under house arrest, that you stay where you're supposed to be. That if you are on curfew, you stay where you're supposed to be during the hours that you're supposed to be there. And if that had happened, Mr. Speaker, it is possible that one young man would still be alive and another young man would not be facing a murder charge, Mr. Speaker. That is the administration of justice. And instead, Mr. Speaker, we have Bill 124 before us, which has practically nothing to do with the administration of justice, and I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, works contrary to the best interests of this House to have a grab bag of miscellaneous provisions, none related to the others, and none having to do with the administration of justice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Agriculture.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise and speak on Bill number 124, an act respecting the administration of justice. And I, in fact, would like to commend the Attorney General for bringing forward this legislation. Relative to the Department of Agriculture and the amendments that pertain to the Department of Agriculture and Marketing Act and the Bee Industry Act, I would like to impart to members opposite that, in fact, this is important legislation. We have, the government, an initiative called Better Regulations and Smart Standards. And part of the principle of that legislation, in fact, or the main part of that legislation and initiative is, in fact, to turn around requests for permits and things of that nature within 10 days. But because of logistics, as members opposite could realize, that is not always possible. The fur industry, for example, Mr. Speaker, a thriving industry, I would submit, in your constituency, and of course other ridings, is very much reliant on the fast turnaround and the expeditious dealing with these requests. And sometimes, through no fault of anybody's, these requests are unnecessarily delayed because of the current process that's in place. And the idea through these amendments would enable the delegated authority to process the permits much more expeditiously. And I believe, as Minister, that makes a lot of sense. Regarding the Bee Industry Act, while it's I guess fun to carry on a little bit regarding the Bee Industry Act, it again is another very important industry to the agriculture community. We have over 100 beekeepers that are registered with the Provincial Association. There's a beekeeper co-op in Cape Breton, and there are as well a number of beekeepers that are not members of the Beekeeper Association or co-op. And each time that the bee industry beekeepers apply for a permit, again, there's a process in place that sometimes isn't as advantageous as it could be, and hence I have asked, and the government has approved bringing forward this amendment to delegate authority to issue these permits. So I just wanted to bring to the attention of the House that these amendments would be very important to the agriculture industry. And I should speak too a little bit to the bee industry and the fact that we have an importation ban, as I'm sure the agriculture critics would know opposite, in the province of Nova Scotia. And we have that importation ban in place to assist the beekeeping industry, because we believe that while we do have some problems with disease compared to other jurisdictions, the concerns and the difficulties that we have are much less than in other jurisdictions. And in North America, in fact, I'm told that Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, because we do share some of the bees that we have and produce, if you will, in Nova Scotia with Prince Edward Island and vice versa. But we have a very healthy bee industry in Nova Scotia. And the reason we have that healthy industry in Nova Scotia is because, in fact, that we do not allow importation unless there is some exceptional circumstances. So you may notice when you arrive in Nova Scotia from another jurisdiction that the signs are up that the importation of bees is banned in the province of Nova Scotia. Now, pollination is very important, and I don't think, in fact, it's indisputable how important pollination is to the farmers of Nova Scotia. And while many farmers don't own bees, the farming community, and in fact I would submit legislators and others appreciate how important the bees are to the fruit and vegetables in the province of Nova Scotia, whether they're domestically grown or whether they're wild fruit. The bees do a lot of work. And Mr. Speaker, the necessity to issue permits and expedite these permits is something that I think will be very good, and I understand probably that element of this legislation would be supported by all members in the Nova Scotia legislature. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Agriculture and Marketing Act itself, outside of the bee, they're two separate acts, two separate pieces of legislation, but the Agriculture and Marketing Act is a very important piece of legislation. And Mr. Speaker, in that act, while we're talking about amending it to permit the minister the provision to delegate authority relative to permits, as well, we want to again take every opportunity to stress the importance of the agriculture industry through the province of Nova Scotia. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know that the dairy farmers in Nova Scotia, for example, have concerns regarding the World Trade Organization negotiations, and members on this side of the House especially, and I would say members on the opposite side of the House are very concerned about the World Trade Organization negotiations regarding the supply managed system. And just yesterday I was very pleased that we had unanimous consent regarding a resolution that I advanced on behalf of supply management. And I want to thank the NDP and I want to thank the Liberals for their support. We will, in due course, make sure that the dairy farmers of Nova Scotia, the poultry producers, the egg producers, the turkey producers, all the farmers and their families that depend on supply management, we want to make sure that they understand that the Nova Scotia legislature unanimously supports supply management. And I am very proud of the members in the House for standing behind that resolution. And we will, in fact, make sure, as I'm sure other members opposite will take the opportunity to impart their support to the farming community. Now, Mr. Speaker, there is commodities, unfortunately, that are struggling in Nova Scotia, trying to deal with international challenges, domestic challenges. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that we are very mindful as MLAs of those issues, and you need look no further than the pork industry, Mr. Speaker. And this government has put forward programming, some ad hoc programs, some direct payments to help the pork producers. We have put forward traditional assistance programs. But it's interestingly enough, was it just last week, the federal government, perhaps it was 2 weeks ago, the federal government came forward with a program, I think it was a $50 million program to assist farmers with the culling, if you will, of hogs, because it's not just a problem in Nova Scotia, it's a problem right across Canada, especially, trying to make a profit raising hogs. So the federal government has put forward a program. I've had some discussions with Pork Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, and have asked that that program be retroactive to September 1st of 07, because in its current form, that program is only retroactive to the 1st of November, and unfortunately some hog farmers essentially exited the business before November of 2007. So I'm hoping that our Federal Minister of Agriculture will support the request, although it may require some additional monetary, and Mr. Speaker, you know how difficult that is when in fact you have done your budgeting and then of course something comes forward outside of the budget in terms of a pressure. So we're going to work with the Federal Minister, work with Pork Nova Scotia, and I know again, and it is by coincidence that again that's a very important industry in your riding, Mr. Speaker. Well, at least, and I guess I would give you that it was a very important industry in the riding of Clare. But and I do appreciate you bringing forward. I want to commend you, Speaker, as the MLA for the area, bringing forward the issues on behalf of the farmers. But it is quite clearly a national problem, and we although we don't. We certainly are not here to boast and brag about the plan that we brought forward, but we do think at the time it was very appropriate and in fact visionary that we recognized that the taxpayers in Nova Scotia just could not continue to subsidize the difference between the cost of production and actually what you're getting for the price of the hog. So anyway, some have transitioned to other models, and we still have some difficulties with the existing farms, and we want to work with them. We want to work with Pork Nova Scotia, and we will work with the federal government as well regarding that new program to assist the farmers. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm only going to speak perhaps for a couple of minutes longer on these two amendments, but again, I would speak in support, obviously, of these two particular amendments, and I know there are several amendments in the Justice Administration Act, and I believe other members, perhaps ministers, would want to speak relative to some of the concerns that would fall within the jurisdiction of their department. For example, Mr. Speaker, we're talking about the Companies Act, we're talking about the Consumer Reporting Act, we're talking about the Executive Council Act, the Public Service Act. There's any number of changes, and some of it is termed housekeeping, and we could call the changes to the Agriculture and Marketing Act and the Bee Industry Act as barn-keeping issues. But quite honestly, Mr. Speaker, these are very, very important pieces of legislation, and they shouldn't be given short shrift by members opposite. And Mr. Speaker, again, I want to say that I very much appreciate the Attorney General bringing forward this legislation, and I trust that all members in the House will be supporting it. Thank you.
I'll now recognize the Honourable Minister of Justice to close debate on Bill number 124.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And before closing debate on Bill 124, the Administrative Justice Act, just a couple of comments with this. And as I indicated going into the debate earlier this morning, it was about the fact that indeed I did not consider what is deemed to be a housekeeping bill to be irrelevant or frivolous or lacking the appropriate amount of debate. It was about the streamlining of a process that has been well talked about. And I would say, Mr. Speaker, I've also indicated to my colleagues that we should take the appropriate time to debate these matters. And indeed, when people talk about the length of debate and days in the House and spent, when I count up the hours that we spend as members of this legislature, that we spend here and have in session, extended hours, probably compared to other legislatures, we would have more hours in than most other legislatures would in terms of how they have their schedule. And I do agree, Mr. Speaker, as other members have talked about, that there may be a need for reform of practice and procedures. I've heard people talk about the need for more family-friendly hours of the legislature, more need for looking at what's relevant for the types of debates and procedures. And I do believe that it does raise, rather than having a debate in the media or some sense that we do not meet as legislators, as Executive Council members, as caucus members, people that serve on the legislative committees of this House, people that are working throughout this province in their own constituencies, the work of the legislature goes well beyond the four walls of this chamber and this building. It is constantly a 24/7 endeavor that we do. And so I do believe for another day there is a full discussion we need to have amongst all parties and members of this House about the relevance of the policies and procedures that we do follow in terms of the operation of the House, and I do believe that's a good one to have. However, I don't think it relates specifically to Bill 124, and indeed that in taking the appropriate amount of time to discuss it. So I do understand if we move past second reading, I would encourage any vested interest or stakeholder group or member of the general public, and indeed members of this legislature, will have the opportunity in law amendments, as we recognize as the only form of its type in Canada, to have an opportunity where the public can come before this legislature. That's a unique thing that doesn't often get celebrated, that we do have that available to Nova Scotians and special interests to come and have their say on a piece of legislation that other legislatures do not provide that mechanism beyond the legislative members themselves. So again, we have that opportunity. There's an opportunity with anyone with any specific element of Bill 124 to discuss that in the Red Chamber, Mr. Speaker, during law amendments, and then further to that, to have the opportunity to come back when we have third reading and have a fulsome discussion following any enlightenment and other aspects. There's an opportunity, as you know, for members of the opposition to propose amendments if they feel there are any faults or flaws. I've heard concern, Mr. Speaker, about what's contained in the bill, but I haven't heard specific that it itself is full of faults and flaws, but that's what the law amendment process is indeed intended to do. And I encourage people and look forward to that opportunity to see that. And I also know that my honourable colleague from Richmond and his viewpoint with regards to justice and issues of the day, I do also recognize that there will be other opportunities, such as question period, where I, as Minister, will be held to account as Attorney General and Minister of Justice for any of the measures that we take as a government and any of the departmental initiatives that I have to oversee. and indeed those public issues that, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, it was about transparency and opening the process up and being willing to go under a microscope and say if there are matters and areas for improvement, items that have to be corrected, then we are going to do that. And I think that that is what the public expects of us, and I intend to do no less than what the public deserves, and that is a fullness of opportunity for debate and understanding of where our systems are. Again, there's the written law, there's the application, indeed, in terms of the operations of how it affects average Nova Scotians that want safer and more secure communities and indeed better government. And that's why we're here. In this, the 250 years that we celebrate Democracy 250, we should be challenging one another. We should be doing exactly what we've heard in this debate here today, to challenge what our different perspectives are. And at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, I know that as Bill 124 moves through, if we've been challenged, if we have to make changes, then indeed democracy is living strong and well in Nova Scotia, because we'll have done what the people deserve, and that is to have the best, most open form of democracy there is. So again, and we do that by the laws of the land which we are professing and proposing, and that's what this bill does. Again, in noting that it's housekeeping in terms of its reference, I do not diminish in any way the significance of any of the components thereof, and nor do we have any intention as the government to try to move it swiftly through. There are opportunities for fulsome debate, and I welcome that debate. And I do want to thank my colleagues for their intercessions here today. Their comments have been duly noted. I appreciate that, and I look forward to the other forums that we have to have the elements of debate and to be held to account as a minister here on the floor, and I look forward to that opportunity when questions come forward in QP. But in the interim, Mr. Speaker, I think at this point I'm very pleased to move second reading of Bill number 124. A closed debate on Bill 124.
Thank you. The motion is for second reading on Bill number 124, the Administration of Justice Act. Is the House ready for the question? The question has been called. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 124, entitled An Act Respecting the Administration of Justice.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, will you please call for debate Bill number 117, the Securities Act.
Public bills for second reading. Bill number 117, the Securities Act. The Honourable the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise for a few moments this morning to speak about Bill number 117, which is proposing amendments to the Security Act, and I am speaking on behalf of my colleague, the Honourable Michael Baker, Minister of Finance, who is responsible. Just to kind of review a little bit for members of the House, they may remember back in 2006, and I think it was the fall session then, that there were significant changes made to the Securities Act in this province. And really what we are doing now is, having done that in 2006, we've had a chance to reflect, to have input from those who work in securities and are involved in the administration of Securities Commission, is probably taking their advice in light of the information that we have and making some additional changes. So effectively, this legislation is a continuation of a process which started in the fall of 2006. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia is committed to promoting an effective and efficient securities market in Canada. And Mr. Speaker, I don't know how many members in the House understand that the issue of securities has been on the national agenda of the Ministers of Justice and the ministers who are responsible for securities in the individual provincial territorial jurisdictions for a number of years. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, it was about a year ago, or a little bit a year ago, I attended a meeting on behalf of my colleague. It was in Niagara-on-the-Lake in Ontario with the Federal Minister of Finance. At that time, it was Mr. Flaherty, and I guess it still is Mr. Flaherty. And one of the topics which he raised for discussion among the provincial and territorial ministers was the whole issue of securities on a national scale. And that was a product of discussion that Nova Scotia had been participating in for some time with the other jurisdictions to try and harmonize, streamline, and modernize securities regulation right across the country. And members may be aware too, because it's been in the press recently, the federal finance minister calling for a national securities commission. And I think members will remember that. Not all the provinces and territories are on side for that at this particular time. It may very well come in the future, but not everybody is there. So what the current practice is to try and harmonize and streamline, modernize securities regulation right across the country. And these amendments that are being proposed are part of that very, very important work. Primarily, the intent is to remove unnecessary red tape in the system. And I was rather interested in hearing the comments of the member from Halifax Fairview when he was debating the last bill, and I was a little amazed to hear him, it appeared to me to be speaking against the government trying to remove red tape, as did the member from Richmond. And I looked at that, and some of the, the efficiency of including some things in the Justice Administration Act, as opposed to, Nova Scotians want to get rid of red tape. I mean, we've had a red tape reduction task force, and I know in the case of my department, we are very conscious and very proud of the efforts that Service Nova Scotia has done to get rid of red tape. So anyway, red tape, Mr. Speaker, indeed, I'm proud to say that, and we've got some very concrete standards which I'd be happy to share with the Minister from Richmond about our turnaround time on document processing. And the fact that we can do this, with about 95% efficiency is very, very good. So anyway, what we're trying to do is move the efficiency that we have in Department of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, and removal of some of the red tape there is to move some of that practice into the security system. Now, I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, at the same time, the fact that we want to remove red tape, we know it's very important to have safeguards there so that the systems work fairly and properly in order to see that investors are protected. And I think we've had a couple of cases in Nova Scotia that have received widespread publicity, and indeed I think I heard of one of them on the, in the news in the past week. But we want to see that our investors are protected. We want companies to disclose important information on time, and we also want to see that investment properties are properly registered. Now, some of the specific amendments in this bill will allow Nova Scotia to join with other provinces in implementing a national registration system. And the streamlined registration process will help remove interprovincial and territorial barriers and reduce costs for companies that are selling mutual funds and other securities. Basically, what it means is that companies registered in one province won't have to repeat that process in 9 other provinces. In other words, if you are registered to do business in one province, then you can be easily registered to do business in the others rather than going through the whole application process again. Mr. Speaker, this is good for everyone. It's good for the investors in Canada and in Nova Scotia. It's good for the companies that do securities business in Nova Scotia and Canada. And it also means that the Nova Scotia Securities Commission can focus on the regulation of Nova Scotia securities companies, and that is important. An investors will ultimately benefit from the improved efficiency in the securities market. The target to implement this new registration system right across Canada is 2009. So this legislation is timely and it is necessary. Other amendments in the bill will enhance the Securities Commission's authority for consumer protection. For example, the Commission will have specific authority to review materials like financial statements, news releases, and other annual information forms. Mr. Speaker, these are the kinds of materials that investors rely upon. And in summary, Mr. Speaker, the amendments in Bill 117 will help improve securities regulation, not only in Nova Scotia, but across Canada. And Mr. Speaker, I would now move adjournment of debate on Bill 117.
The motion before the House is for the debate on Bill number 117 be adjourned. That's correct? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. The Honourable, the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that concludes the government's business for today. I move that the House do now rise and meet again Monday from the hours of 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. That following the daily routine, government business will be public bills for second reading, continuing with the debate on Bill number 117, the Securities Act, followed by consideration of Bill number 126, the Fair Access to Regulated Professions Act, and subsequent to that, either Bill number 123 and 125. So moved.
Thank you. The motion before the House for the House to rise and meet again on Monday at 6 p.m. Is the House ready for the question? Question. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. The House stands adjourned until 6 p.m. Monday night.